Hey, welcome to Hearsay. I'm Paul,
And I'm Patrick.
and today we're going to be talking about the survival movies and subplots kind of thing. So why are we so fascinated by essentially the idea of man or person versus the environment or a creature or something? Why is that survival thing always so intriguing to us? And specifically, we're going to talk about the movies first. So movies that are specifically detailing that. So things like Tom Hanks's Castaway, which was Mark Wahlberg's, which was The Martian, which was James Franco's 127 Hours Later, things like these kind of thing. But why is it, Patrick? Do you think that movies like these are incredibly popular? Why is that topic or that kind of story very appealing to the audience? You think?
Well, I think a lot of people would stop at just the big obvious, which is life or death. So anything that people think will affect their literal survival, their ability to go on living, that's the most fundamental thing to the human condition. There's certain things that are just ingrained in all mankind. But I think from a storytelling point of view, the reason I think this is the unkillable genre, or it will always be one of the cornerstones of movies and entertainment, is because it's so rich. The idea of putting somebody in danger, even if it's danger for their life, that's not survival. So, James Bond runs around and, oh, yeah, but that's not a survival movie. That's just a
Yeah.
life or death situation, as part of an action movie or whatever it might be. But when you structure your story, the f- to be, would you survive this? It becomes that question that the audience can ask themselves. So it's incredibly rich and vibrant and opportunity laden for a writer, for a creator to say, okay, I'm going to put my subject in peril. But if you then say, actually, my entire premise here is that my subject is in peril,
Yeah.
then you get to have fun with all the different ways. It's, will they survive for this, for that? Well, you can give them setbacks. You can build hope and then destroy it. You can do heroes' journeys and three act structures all day long to just play with the ever shifting tides of will they make it, will they not? And when that's ingrained in the premise of your story, when you know that from frame one, or from setup to beyond, I think everybody puts themselves into the movie. People always say, "I want to see myself on screen" and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I've always we've argued about this plenty of times on the channel. I don't think I have to see somebody who looks like me, sounds like me, acts like me. I think it's about the human experience, and there is nothing more fundamental.
Yeah, I agree. I think that one of the best things about the kind of that this genre of movie, specifically just the genre of movies, is that the examples that I gave and the examples that we have in the other things they are so personable. Like The Martian, Castaway, which was 127 hours later, or 127 hours, not part of the 28
28
series.
days later, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but also things like Everest and stuff, they're so personable because they have such generally a tight cast generally, and we're focused on
Mm,
like a very small group of people, one, two, possibly four or five, struggling against some kind of adversary, being it environmental or other. And I think that makes it
mm,
a very personal story of like you can see yourself in either the main character or one of the main characters in that kind of thing, as you were saying, kind of things. It is very tight kind of storytelling. Like when you're like the majority of Castaway is and The Martian is essentially a single person struggle to survive, and I do
yeah.
think that struggle is essentially why we are so interested and why we kind of buy into the we buy into the movie a lot of the times. But as you're right, when we expand out into just it being essentially a framework that is used in
Mm,
plenty of movies, obviously not, as you say, not in action movies where it's like a job, you're a secret agent or an act like or a cop or something like that. That's not survival, but like struggling and surviving against something. Like the zombie apocalypse is entirely a zombie survival genre.
yeah,
Survival
yeah.
is essentially the secondary kind of things. And yeah, I do agree that the built-in kind of chapters, the framework of essentially survival is there. So it's easy, not like it's easy to essentially know the story beats and stuff like that. Like obviously good writing is still integral to them being very
Yeah,
successful. But it does have a kind of built-in things. Survival is a struggle versus something, and
yeah.
what that is and what entails is where the writer kind of comes in kind of a lot more.
And for me, Paul, that's it. Like it's you know you've got the cliffhanger moment, and I shouldn't have said cliffhanger. You've got the rocks about to land on your head moment of danger or peril, or somebody about to get shot, danger or peril. But if you go with just the backdrop of what we're talking about in the more general sense of survival being a theme, you can take something like Castaway and find that it is just the room that he's running around in. Like survival is it's the area in which the story's written because it's a personal story. It's about someone. It's about the human condition, and it's not just his focus on how to get off the island or survive or live or his ingenuity. You can have a look at humans. You can have a look at love, loss, regret. You can have the most gentle and tender moments. And I'm not saying, Predator became a survival movie once they realized they were being hunted. There weren't too many tender moments in that,
Yeah, yeah,
except maybe, some brotherly love going on there. But take something like Alive. If anybody remembers that old movie where it's based on a real story of an Argentinian rugby team, I think they were, that
yeah,
crashed in the mountains, and they did have to turn to people say turn to cannibalism for survival. I think that's a sensational way of saying they used all resources that were available to them in the most extreme circumstance. So that's a survival story told with a group, but similarly you had the ability not just to ask yourself, what would I do? The big tentpole question for
yeah,
that movie was, would you eat somebody, a dead friend to survive? Ooh, that's your social media moment of today. But there was, how would you feel about other people's choice to do it, not to do it? If you chose to do it and someone else chose not to do it, would that affect you? How would you feel then? Would you think that naturally there would become tension because there's judgment in the room, there's judgment on the mountaintop?
yeah, yeah.
I think there's so many areas to actually study humanity in a survival backdrop that's one of the reasons why it's not stale. It's not like just mentioning any other thin genre that's just about danger.
Hmm.
It's it's such a vast canvas to draw, paint, and color all your different sections of the human experience.
So would you say that I think survival movies kind of any survival movie kind of personifies the human spirit of survival, the evolutionary trait of essentially humanity's kind of inbuilt essentially spirit of survival, the will to go on, the will to succeed kind of thing, as in and
Yeah,
what those things entail. And I think that's a strong point in the sense of kind of inspiring a lot of people kind of thing.
and Paul, I would say it also shows the importance of that up to the point of sacrifice. Because how many survival stories, true or imagined, involve an individual or individuals choosing to sacrifice themselves so others can survive? And that's one of those real powerful moments in storytelling, reminding humans, yeah, we all have that in us that we want to go on, that we want to survive. But there will be people who will step up and make difficult choices that are going to adversely affect them for the survival of others.
Hmm.
And I think then societally, you can bring that out and recognize that there are people that do jobs that I'm incapable of doing, and they do it. You can really look in every direction. You can look to the person, or you can look out to society. And I think it's because, like you just said, it comes from maybe the most basic primal instinct to survive, but it isn't where it stops. It's just the first domino to fall in the human condition.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting. Like I think these movies have always been an interesting kind of one for audiences because of like that trait of just the spirit, the indomitable spirit to go on and everything. And I think that personal, like the personal kind of stories in that and the interpersonal relationships within that kind of context is also very, very interesting. I think it's why like Lord of the Flies is such an interesting kind of like still to this day is a very interesting kind of story book movie kind of like thing to keep
Yeah.
and to watch and to read simply because you see the changes of humanity as well, like when it is survival kind of thing, and the conflicts and things. It's yeah, and then from a story perspective, as we said before, it is a good framework, a natural framework for a lot of things, um, because essentially it is what happens when we're taken out of our kind of like, well, our talking from personal experience or my personal life, my cushy kind of lifestyle, and
Yeah.
taking that and then essentially turning that on its head and putting it into a place where like that, where survival isn't as simple. It isn't essentially a given anymore. It is a struggle. It is like, things, and what does that do to a person, um kind of thing. And I think that the movies that specifically focus on that, like The Martian and probably the upcoming Hail Mary in a sense, kind of thing, will also like, I think it's always been going to be interesting. I don't think it's ever going to go
Yeah.
away. And then it's certainly the underlying framework of essentially it for storytelling is never going to go away, really.
No, again, because and that's the thing. Survival is it's both a genre and a a flash of a moment of a plot point of story arc of whatever. The idea that it's one of the few things that are it crosses. It's both a liquid, a gas, and a solid.
Yeah.
It's all three of those things at once. Now we're talking about the survival movie genre, but because it's so fundamental to storytelling, to put people in danger. Now, sometimes it won't be full mortal danger. It'll just be danger of fear of being hurt or loss or whatever that might be. Um, but I think we've gotten, and this is a big statement. I'm hesitant to say this. I think the quality of writing over the years, maybe not for all mainstream choice of movies, but I think people have realized that there are new and more interesting things you can say when someone's in danger than there was, let's say, in the past, maybe like 40 years ago. I think maybe 80 to 100 years ago, you were much more likely, even in the early days of movie making, you were much more likely to show the interpersonal part of what danger means, what you'll have to do to survive will mean. And I think for a while there, when the with the rise of the action movie and the ability to do so much more with explosions and make danger more complex, I'm seeing a return to people using, and I'm not just talking terror or horror here, but using that mental strain of, well, what will I do to survive in the grander scheme? Will I steal to feed my family? Because
Mhm.
feeding my family is survival. But do I need the food that I'm stealing, or would I be able to get by with, cheaper food and not steal at all? I,
Mm.
I think I think survival as a concept is more ingrained, more subtly now than ever before, and I think that's what's making some, particularly independent movies, even richer for it.
So um do you think that the reason that survival movies or survival kind of storylines are becoming more popular or becoming more complex and more interesting nowadays because the concept of just surviving is more alien to the common person? Would that be a good way of
Could you survive without your mobile phone? And people will go, I couldn't survive without my mobile phone. And then I'll say, okay, I'm going to say it again with an emphasis on could you survive without your
yeah,
mobile phone? What's considered subsistence versus survival versus a quality of life is has definitely changed. It has definitely changed since the start of moving pictures. We're living in a different world. Like you described our lives as cushy there. I think that's fair to say. By no means does anybody that has the ability to transmit something onto YouTube
yeah.
can they say that they're at the bottom of the rung of society? Because no, they're just not. The fact that we have a microphone in front of us puts us somewhere into the top 50% of humans on Earth, more than likely, Paul.
Yeah, but so from that though, does it make it more kind of interesting to audience goers of that type because it's so alien to them, kind of thing? As in like being trusted
Yeah,
upon a island, kind of thing without anything. It becomes a lot more
yeah.
interesting to the audiences because it is so alien, like
Well,
kind of thing.
yeah. You take an 1800s farmer and show them Castaway, and they'll be like, "Well, the first thing I do is plant this, this, and this," or people whose everyday life, and there were many more of them that were used to having a hands-on relationship with literal survival. Whereas now, and I'm not bagging on farmers here before anybody comes at me, but now you understand what a combine harvester is. It's
Yeah,
industrialized.
industrializing and stuff like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it's
So yeah,
it's
but what made it hit you, Paul? What was it that brought you to this point of wanting to talk about survival as a theory and how it relates to movies and entertainment?
so. I think the reason that the topic came up is I was watching Castaway, and I noticed that essentially that form of movie, Castaway, Martian, like Everest, 127 hours, like those kind of movies have never left essentially my library of rewatchability kind of thing. I know what's going to happen. I know that the
Yeah.
person's going to survive at the end, but the struggle and the story is so compelling that like I think it's so interesting to watch. And I was just like, why is it that these movies that every time they come out, they are quite popular? Now obviously they're not making
Yeah.
massive box office, but they're popular enough. And then further discussion with you is why also is survival such a integral subframe of essentially storytelling in a lot of movies.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how like it sets up the kind of pieces. But I think one of the most interesting things is that yeah, the question that you can ask yourself is, would you survive? So much so that we have set up an entire series, which like I'll put a link up here, guys, to the playlist. We've put up a playlist of essentially would you survive questions of where we would survive in different movie universes,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's such a
And Castaway is coming. Castaway is coming, everybody, before you ask. We haven't done that one yet.
but yeah, it's such an interesting kind of it's such an interesting topic, and it's such an interesting story arc or story development that I was just like, yeah, this is never going away in my opinion, and they're always
Mhm.
seemingly popular. So
And can I squeeze one thing in just before the end, Paul? And that is that there's going to be some people that watch this and go, duh, of course. That's the most fundamental thing. But no, think about it. If you actually just ask somebody on the street to pick genres of movie, they'll mention action or blah, blah, blah. Or if you change the question and said, so what do you think the most important thing in a storyline is for a movie? A lot of people will say, like, romance. Love is the primal feeling. Now, I like to live my life by that dictum that love should be the most important thing. Love, happiness, and spreading it as far as you can. But no, people will not honestly jump to survey. You will after we've talked about it, or while we're talking about it, when it's brought up in front of you. But really, if you ask the random person on the street, it should only be two types of movies that are really dominating culture, and that would be, bang bang explosions and then rom-coms, because everybody will always say love and laughter. But really, behind all that, if you look at the broader spectrum, it's what we've just talked about. And that's why when Paul brought this up with me, I was like, that's a genius thing to talk about, Paul, because everybody will hear it as being quite obvious. And I hope a lot of people will realize it's actually not until you say it out loud. It's
mm,
not at all obvious to most, but it's just so fundamental that people assume it.
I'm glad. Um,
Hmm.
so let us know down in the comments down below what you think, which is of this episode. Like, do you think survival is essentially one of the most important building blocks of movies today? In a lot of in the movies that it kind of adheres to. And let us know some of your favorite survival movies, which is down in the comments down. And of course, if there's anything that you want us to do on the show, let us know down as well. Like, subscribe, ring that notification bell. Anything else, Patrick?
No, I think I'll just say I've been Patrick,
I've been Paul.
and we've been Heroes Out.
Chat to
See
you
you
later.
next time.